Hello and welcome back to the Scenario 7 podcast. My name is Sam and today I'm joined by the lovely Mr. Matt Collier. Matt, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing good, thank you, Sam. Been busy, but yeah, it's a pleasure to be back. How are you doing?
I'm all good, mate. It's great to have you. And today we're here for an Azerbaijan Grand Prix review where we look back at the weekend in Baku at the Baku City Circuit and see, well, we just talk about the race. We just give our thoughts, go through an incident report, go through team by team and give our driver of the day. But let's start on Saturday at qualifying. Matt, what things from qualifying stood out to you?
There's quite a lot that stood out from qualifying. A lot of shocks. The first one being Haas. No Haas driver got out of the first qualifying session in Spain. Both of them qualified in the top 10, so that was a bit of a shock. Another shock was the pace of the Alfa Romeos in qualifying. Bottas got out qualified by Wanyu Zhou, which was very surprising. And yeah, the Alfa Romeos slowly dropping off in pace. Even at Monaco, Alfa Romeos didn't look particularly quick. And then another shock was the qualifying pace of McLaren, qualifying P11 and P12. I kind of expected at least one of them to qualify in the top 10. So yeah, they're my thoughts of the shocks from qualifying.
Yeah, we had in Q1, we had Lance Stroll as well, who had an absolute nightmare where he crashed into the wall, kept going, decided, you know what, we don't need to pit. We'll just keep going despite potentially having a bit of wing damage and have flat spotted our tyres. Let's just keep going. And then turn two, bang, he's in the wall. He's causing a red flag, which just is so Lance Stroll. As you said, both McLarens out in Q2. I think it was good to see that Zhou Guanyu out-qualifying Valtteri Bottas, even though, as you said, the Alfa Romeo pace looks to be getting slower. Zhou out-qualified Bottas shows steps he's making in his development. Both Alpha Tauris in Q3 showing their strength. And then Leclerc on pole with Perez second and Verstappen third. But let's move to Sunday now and talk about the race. First of all, what were your general thoughts on the race? Do you think it was a good one?
Yeah, I saw quite a bit of criticism that it was quite boring. It was never going to be as good as it was last year. I think that's the reality, really. Still a lot happened. A lot of DNS, good overtakes. The only things it really missed was like a safety car or red flag. So I would still consider it was like a good race, probably like a 6 out of 10, but didn't quite live up to what it delivered last year.
Yeah, as you said, last year set such a high bar that it was never really going to live up to it. Though I still think it was a good race. This track is just so unique because it just destroys cars, whether that's through the barriers, through the tough, windy bits of the circuit. I mean, not this time. This time it was through just forcing car failures. And we had so many, especially with the Ferrari power units. Some interesting strategy and setup choices as well that kept it interesting. It made overtaking harder for some teams and easier for others. I mean, we can go on to talk about later the Alpine, who I thought had a very interesting setup choice with Ocon and Alonso. But I think it was a good race. And this track still producing some solid racing and interesting strategy and setup choices. Let's go through the incident report now. And while there was no crashes, there was quite a few retirements. And first of all, we're just going to start with just going through one driver's penalties. The only driver to get penalties this weekend, and he got two. First of all, Nicholas Latifi getting a 10-second stop-go penalty for a starting grid infringement where the engineer pushed the car back into his space after he overshot it slightly. Matt, 10-second stop-go penalty. Do you think this was fair?
I think it was fair. The rules are the rules. I don't understand why it took them that long to push him back. And yeah, Latifi just didn't have a great weekend. I'm going to talk about the other penalty as well, the blue flag one. Yeah, Latifi and blue flags, it's a recurring theme. Even at Monaco, I watched some onboard footage of Carlos Sainz coming just behind Nicholas Latifi, and Latifi took forever to let Carlos Sainz pass, and that could have potentially cost Sainz the race win. So yeah, it's just a recurring theme with Latifi and blue flags, and I think both the penalties were deserved.
Yeah, as you said, not only did you get a 10-second stop go, but you got a 5-second for ignoring blue flag. So that's 15 seconds worth of penalties over the weekend. I mean, considering that he was going to be towards the back anyway, that while it didn't have much of an effect, it meant that he couldn't potentially compete for a not even top 10, maybe a top 12 because of his racking up of penalties. But yeah, as these weekends go by, there are more question marks over him, especially with his nightmare in Baku, with Piastri getting linked pretty much every week, with De Vries being heavily linked. Yeah, this man is not going to be in a seat in 2023. I think that's clear, but I think he'll probably keep his seat for the rest of the season. On to the rest of the incidents, and it's just retirees from now on. On lap 9, Carlos Sainz retiring with a hydraulic failure, causing a virtual safety car. Lap 20, Charles Leclerc retired with an engine blowout, which was the first double mechanical DNF since the 1997 British Grand Prix for Ferrari. On lap 24, Zhou Guanyu retired with a technical issue for the third time this season. This man cannot buy any luck. Lap 33, Kevin Magnussen retired with an engine problem, causing another virtual safety car. And that's enough with the Ferrari retirees. The Mercedes power unit did retire as well, when on lap 48, Lance Stroll retired with vibration issues. That is our incident report. Again, not really much to talk about because most of it is just engine issues. So let's go on to team by team breakdown, starting with Red Bull, who extend their lead at the top of the constructors table, getting 44 points, getting first through Max Verstappen, who started third, and second through Checo Perez, who started second, but did get the fastest lap as well. How do you look at Red Bull's weekend, especially considering that their biggest competitors, Ferrari, really struggled?
Yeah, they maximised their potential. Another 1-2. They don't quite have the raw speed of Leclerc in qualifying, but that doesn't matter because in order to finish the race, first you must finish, and that's what Red Bull are doing. That's what Ferrari aren't doing. Yeah, another 1-2. It reminds me a lot of Fernando Alonso in 2012. Leclerc, I think it was like a 46-point lead over Verstappen, and the last time someone lost that lead in the championship was 2012, where Alonso had a 40-point lead in a Ferrari, and Sebastian Vettel at Red Bull ended up winning. And yeah, this Ferrari Red Bull battle, it's happened many years before throughout the past, and yeah, Red Bull, as I said, just looked like the much better team, and yeah, they fully maximised their points. So can't really complain. 1-2, that's probably what they wanted. So, yeah, very good weekend for Red Bull.
Yeah, certainly a good weekend. Max Verstappen just very solid on the Sunday. It's a shame that Perez couldn't really compete with him, really. It was clear to see that he, for some reason, just had a struggle with his tyres where he just couldn't get a lot of rear grip, which meant they couldn't compete for the lead. The team let him by, which, to be honest, I don't have any issues with. In Spain, I was a bit more annoyed because at the end of the day, that I think they should have fought. But here, Perez was significantly slower, and there was just no need to risk them crashing out. I mean, of course, Red Bull have history at Baku, where their two drivers competed for the lead, going down the main straight, and then double DNF. So I think that was the wise thing. Shame for Perez, he couldn't really compete, but it's clear to see that Red Bull, as you said, have the better race car. And I think that's the way to go, really. While Ferrari have that one lap pace in qualifying and they get a lot of pole positions, they can't convert it because Ferrari's pace is just so much more in the race. Moving on to Ferrari, who, from Red Bull getting the maximum points, Ferrari got the minimum, with both their cars DNFing. Leclerc putting his car on pole and then DNFing, and Sainz fourth to DNF. I mean, from the highs to the low, how do you sum up Ferrari's weekend?
Yeah, this championship is slowly falling away from them in the drivers and the constructors. And yeah, as I said, Red Bull versus Ferrari's happened many times in Formula One. And for me, Ferrari just don't have that experience of Red Bull. An interesting stat is the last time Ferrari drivers world champion was in 2007, and that was Kimi Raikkonen. To put that into perspective, Lewis Hamilton never been world champion at that time. Hamilton won his first one in 2008. And of course, Hamilton's now got 7 world titles. There's been so many battles with Ferrari and Red Bull. There's been so many drivers at Ferrari that probably should have won championships. For example, Felipe Massa, Fernando Alonso, and Sebastian Vettel. And yeah, these reliability issues for Ferrari kind of came out of nowhere at the start of the season, and it's just kind of been propping up after all these races. And it seems that the Ferrari power unit can't cope with hot conditions, or it just doesn't do well in the heat. And yes, it's shown really with Alfa Romeo's reliability problems as well as Haas's. And yeah, they've definitely got a lot of headaches and problems to solve at Ferrari.
Yeah, they certainly do. Going back to the start of the season, I remember having a conversation with you saying the problem with Red Bull is their reliability. They're really struggling because you have so many DNFs at the start, and now it's completely flipped. We're 8 races into the season, and it's Ferrari who are having the problems, and it's not just them, but other teams who have their power unit also DNF'd and are experiencing issues, especially poor old Zhou Guanyu. So, yeah, a torrid Sunday for Ferrari, despite the promise on the Saturday where they showed that they have great one-lap pace. Of course, Sainz coming fourth is all right on Saturday. But yeah, Leclerc putting a mega lap, looked really solid. And then just reliability, Leclerc engine blowout, and Sainz hydraulic issue. So very poor weekend for Ferrari standards, and they really need to get that reliability sorted. Otherwise, the title is going to slip away, and Mercedes, who we're going to talk about now, are going to catch up on them, because Mercedes this weekend got 27 points, picked up the most points for any team other than Red Bull, with George Russell starting 5th and finishing 3rd, and Hamilton starting 7th and finishing 4th. How do you look at Mercedes this weekend, and do you think that they could compete with Ferrari for second place?
First of all, I think they had a very good weekend. They'll be very pleased with third and fourth. Baku has this massive long straight, and I think they finished third and fourth with all their porpoising issues and top speed. I think they'll be very happy. Russell's just so consistent at the moment, and Hamilton had a brilliant drive from going from P7 to P4. It was a bit unlucky for Hamilton when he had to double stack, so he kind of had to gain those positions during the race. And yeah, as you mentioned, the Ferrari, Mercedes constructors and drivers, it's getting very interesting because Mercedes are definitely closing the gap. I think Russell's already ahead of Sainz in the Drivers' Championship, and I think Russell's only like 30 points off Leclerc, or around 30 points. When talking about at the start of the season, you would have thought that was crazy because of how well Leclerc was doing in the championship. But yeah, as I said earlier, first you have to finish the races, and Mercedes is the only constructor to have no DNFs, which kind of explains how crazy this season's been with reliability issues. But we'll have to wait and see if Ferrari can fix their reliability problems throughout the season.
Yeah, as you said, very solid weekend for Mercedes, but a word that we've talked about so much this season is porpoising, and porpoising was a massive issue for Mercedes again this weekend. Not just Mercedes, a lot of teams, but it was especially highlighted at Mercedes because of Lewis Hamilton having major back problems after Saturday and having to nurse that through the race. I mean, he looked frail getting out of the car. He was in a lot of pain, and Toto Wolff, not for the first time, coming on team radio and apologising to Lewis, saying that they're going to get it sorted out. But I'm going to ask you another question, Matt, but if you were Mercedes, what would you do here? Because at the end of the day, you could raise the ride height, but then lose performance, or you could keep it the same, but you're injuring your drivers. So what is the thing to do here? If you were Mercedes, what is the solution?
It's very interesting. I think Aston Martin kind of had a similar problem at the start of the season where they basically didn't have any porpoising, but it meant they were really slow. And yeah, for Mercedes, they're having a lot of porpoising because they're trying to increase the pace of the car. I think Christian Horner explained it quite well. Mercedes are the ones that are having the bigger issues, and other drivers and constructors are finding ways to solve these problems. It can be resolved, as you said. You can adjust the ride height, but yeah, it's definitely a safety concern. But yeah, Mercedes are having to do all this bouncing around just to try and get the maximum pace out of the car. So yeah, I still think it will go on throughout the season, but something definitely needs to be done with all this porpoising, because I think about these new regulations. I don't know how many years of porpoising we're going to be talking about, but it seems like a few years. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, we had Toto Wolff come out and say that the drivers actually had a meeting about it, talking about whether it should be on each team to sort it out, or whether it should be an FIA bringing in a new regulation where there is a maximum or a minimum ride height, or there's something which fixes the porpoising but is for every team, so it doesn't give other teams an advantage. And he said that every driver was down for looking to investigate the issues apart from Alonso. But Alonso has been a party pooper quite a few times this season, just even going back to Monaco, holding people up. Even in qualifying for Baku, he held people up when they were trying to do a hot lap. So that's just typical Alonso shenanigans. But it'll be interesting to see what they do with this because, as you said, it's a safety concern. But just looking at Mercedes generally this weekend, 27 points, maximum points other than with Red Bull. So I think they'll be very happy. Let's move on to McLaren, who had both drivers in the points, with Ricciardo finishing above Norris, which is a step in the right direction for him. They got 6 points over the weekend, with Norris finishing 9th after starting 11th and Ricciardo finishing 8th after starting 12th. How do you reflect on McLaren's weekend?
I think they'll be pleased, but at the same time, I think it could have been so much more. For example, like Gasly finished P5, Vettel P6, Alonso P7. So yeah, I think they'll be pleased with where they qualified, P12, P11 to finish inside the points, and especially Ricciardo after all of the pressure he's getting at the moment about his drive for next season, all that kind of shenanigans. But yeah, it was quite interesting seeing the strategy for both the McLaren drivers, and you could tell Norris was getting frustrated over the radio. But yeah, they got 6 points from the weekend, so they can't really complain.
No, can't really complain, but at the same time, could have potentially been a bit more. The McLaren is in a very... I still don't really know what we're getting with the McLaren because it's still slightly track dependent. It's not competing at a level where I think it potentially could, but at the end of the day, Ricciardo beating Norris, despite the fact that if they were allowed to fight, Norris potentially gaining a place back, is a step in the right direction because, as you said, so much pressure over his seat for next season. And hopefully now he can produce results that we know he can. We've said it so many times. He's such a talented driver. And it's been so strange that he hasn't been able to produce that at McLaren. But hopefully he gets that sorted, and Norris, just another solid drive. 9th place. It's solid without being spectacular. Probably the most they could have extracted out of the car. Let's now move on to Alpine, who are the team that fascinated me the most this weekend, I think it's fair to say. So we had Fernando Alonso starting 10th, finishing 7th, and Esteban Ocon starting 13th, finishing 10th, getting a combined 7 points for the weekend. And I'm going to talk about them quickly now because it was a very interesting setup choice because everyone went slightly different in how they decided to set up for this track. But I think Alpine's was the most interesting because they decided to go for a very skinny rear wing, which meant in sector 3, they were the best team because you have that main straight. It's flat out pretty much for the majority of that sector. So in sector 3, they were the quickest team. They were putting all the best times in all weekends. And in fact, the Fernando Alonso put in the highest recorded speed this weekend. And it was, of course, in sector 3 along the main straight, with Ocon putting in the 3rd fastest speed this weekend. So they clearly wanted to extract the most out of sector 3, but then having this setup meant that they lost massively in sector 1 and 2, where it's more tight and there's more corners, and it also caused a lot of tyre wear. However, for Alpine, finishing 7th and 10th, that's a solid result. So do you think that this strategy choice worked, this setup choice worked? And what do you think of their weekend?
I think their strategy did work. I think the skinny rear wing helped them not only like the pace of the main straight, but also meant that people behind with DRS really struggled to overtake. I remember Hamilton was closing so many times on Esteban Ocon, had DRS and basically couldn't get anywhere near the Alpine, so he had to keep pushing and pushing. And then finally, Hamilton ended up getting past Ocon. But we've seen these skinny rear wings before. Last year at Monza, we saw very skinny rear wings. So I expect to see that again this year. And yeah, I think they'll be pleased that they decided to take this approach. Another topic I'm going to talk about is kind of car development. And yeah, with all these DNS reliability problems, some teams haven't been able to develop the car, mainly all the Ferrari power units, because having so many DNFs. Alfa Romeo brought something new to this weekend, and it was just a green line of paint, whilst Alpine brought a skinny rear wing, which did benefit them at the end. So yeah, 7 points for Alpine. I think they'll be very pleased with how they did this weekend.
Yeah, certainly very solid points, and cool to see a difference in the setup, which I think made the race a lot more interesting because, as you said, they were just so hard to overtake in the overtaking spots of the two DRS zones. So, yeah, I thought Alpine were a lot of fun this weekend. Now, moving on to Alfa Romeo, who did bring, as you said, a line of paint, but that didn't bring performance, picking up 0 points this weekend, with Valtteri Bottas starting 15th and finishing 11th, and Zhou Guanyu starting 14th and DNFing again because his car just doesn't work for some reason. But how do you look at Alfa Romeo this weekend? Because first of all, in qualifying, very low, and then Bottas did the best he could, and Zhou DNFing. That car's in trouble. But yeah, what do you think of Alfa Romeo?
I think they're going to be a bit shocked, considering all the other teams got, a lot of the other teams got more points, is what I'm trying to say. But with the developments of the car, with the cost cap and all these reliability problems that Alfa Romeo are having, other teams are bringing upgrades, but all these DNFs and crashes and all sorts do cost Alfa Romeo a lot of money. And yeah, even in Monaco, Bottas wasn't quite up to what he used to doing this season. I think he only just finished P10 in Monaco, where he's normally like P5, P6. So yeah, the pace of the Alfa Romeo is definitely dropping off. Into this weekend, I thought they would have had a lot more pace, kind of similar to Saudi Arabia. I thought they would have been really quick on the straights, around that P8, P7 kind of mark. But yeah, this weekend they just had no pace, and yeah, Bottas definitely struggled. As I explained earlier, it was a bit of a shock that Guanyu Zhou out-qualified him, and yeah, to get 0 points from 5 DNFs is kind of a massive disappointment, considering how well they did at the start of the season. So yeah, I think they'll be very disappointed with how they've done this weekend.
Yeah, I just really feel for Zhou Guanyu, to be honest. As you said, out qualifying Bottas for the first time. Bottas admittedly did have a terrible weekend where he just about made it into Q2, but by the skin of his teeth. And then he just needs, I don't really know what's going on with that car, because it is the majority of the DNFs are happening with his car. And at the end of the day, they're not going to get points if they don't finish the race. Not to be very Will Buxton, but it's they're reducing their likelihood of points because they're just having these problems. And I just feel for Zhou, because at the end of the day, all the spotlight's on him. He's a rookie in Formula One. A lot of people thought Piastri should have got the seat over him. And he's not getting the platform to show what he could do because his car just breaks down. I mean, he was in the points when he broke down this time. So, yeah, unfortunate for him. And, yeah, just not a great weekend for them overall. But the team behind them got the 3rd most points this weekend, that being AlphaTauri, who potentially have finally come alive in this Constructors' Championship. So 10 points this weekend, with Tsunoda starting 8th and finishing 13th, But the man who is normally reliable but has struggled this weekend is maybe back to being his reliable self. Pierre Gasly starting sixth, finishing fifth, bringing home 10 points for AlphaTauri, which is very solid. How do you look at their weekend? Yuki Tsunoda definitely creating a lot of headlines with his gaffer taped rear wing.
Yeah, it was quite funny watching that. I was kind of joking to my dad, like, what are they going to do? Stick some tape on it, and that's exactly what they ended up doing. Yeah, they got, I think it was the black and orange flag because they had to pick, so it was dangerous, and it was quite funny seeing them stick it together. But I do feel for Yuki Tsunoda because he was actually having a really good weekend. He was P6 before he had to pit when his DRS kind of just, I don't know, it was weird. Like half of it got stuck open, half of it was open. But yeah, I think they'll be pleased with getting 10 points, obviously, but it could have been so much more with Yuki Tsunoda. Gasly had a much better weekend. It kind of just proves that drivers have favourite tracks and do well at tracks that they like, kind of thing. And yeah, it kind of proves that point with Gasly finishing fifth and Vettel sixth, and both of those drivers end up on the podium last year. So yeah, we'll have to see if there's any more favourite tracks for them throughout the season. But yeah, AlphaTauri will definitely be very happy this weekend, and pleased they don't have a Ferrari power unit in the back of their car, that's for sure.
Yeah, they're certainly going to be glad of that. We said Vettel and Gasly having favourite tracks, Perez as well, P2. So another one who actually won the race last year and has an excellent record in Baku and has added another podium to that. But yeah, unfortunate for Yuki Tsunoda, it did fill me with enjoyment. Not just seeing them gaffer tape the back of the car, but just to hear Paul di Resta just being, he was livid. He was like, no, they can't go out like that. They're going to retire the car. And then they get the gaffer tape out, and he's just, he was not very happy at all, which did bring me quite a bit of joy. Nothing against Paul di Resta, but it was very funny hearing him have a little rant about it. But yeah, very good points considering only one of the cars finished in the points. So Pierre Gasly, hopefully his season comes alive now, because so far he's been fairly disappointing, and hopefully this is the race that turns it around and can prove why he deserves a seat in a better team, because he definitely does. But this season, unfortunately, hasn't been able to prove it. Now on to the Haas, who, if they're not careful, are going to be like dragged down to ninth, because they got 0 points this weekend with Kevin Magnussen 16th to a DNF. And I'm pretty sure he's running in the points when he DNF. So unfortunate for him. And then Schumacher 20th to 14th. How do you look at the Haas this weekend, with Günther Steiner coming out and saying that they're struggling to develop the car because the majority of their funds are going into fixing it in the first place?
Yeah, it kind of proves the point I was making earlier about, all these reliability problems that teams are having, which means they're having to, build or replace things that other teams are developing their cars. On to Haas, they'll be very disappointed with how they've done. Even their qualifying pace was shocking, to be honest, P16 and P14. When you look at how Haas were doing at the start of the season, even Spain, as I explained earlier, both of them qualified in the top 10 of Spain. But particularly Bahrain, Magnussen finishing P5, it kind of just proves how quickly the midfield can change, and if you don't start developing your car and finding ways to make it quicker, you can drop down the constructors. And yeah, to think that Aston Martin are now level on points with Haas is, well, it's quite strange. As I said, Magnussen got fifth in Bahrain, which is 10 points, and yeah, they just haven't had the reliability all the consistency. Magnussen was, fluctuating around the points. It was like P10, P11, and it was actually having a quite decent race from where he qualified. And Schumacher's still struggling a lot with his car. And I think throughout the season, these are the kind of races that need to capitalize. As I said, 5 DNFs, and with the potential that car had at the start of the season, they'll definitely be very disappointed with how they've done this weekend.
Yeah, it still is a case of if Kevin Magnussen doesn't get points, they're getting 0 points for the weekend. Because as you said, Mick Schumacher is struggling. I've been rather critical of him this season, and it is tough because it's a new era of Formula One. It's a completely new car. So a lot of these drivers are in the dark, and he's just not adapting well. And he's just, at the end of the day, he has, from the outlook, it looks like he started 20th. Oh, and he's finished 14th. Oh, great. He's gained 6 places. But then in reality, 5 of those places were going through DNFs. And the person who came last was Latifi, who got 15 seconds worth of penalties for blue flags and grid infringements. So it's tough. They need to start getting points, but it's not looking great for Haas. Williams are even worse, but they're starting to drop down the order. And if Magnussen doesn't get points, as I said, then nobody is. So hopefully we'll see improvements in the coming weeks. But now on to Aston Martin, who, as you mentioned earlier, Sebastian Vettel, he loves this track and he's done very well here again. They got a combined 8 points this weekend, say combined. One driver finished, the other didn't. So Vettel got 8 points this weekend, starting 9th and finishing 6th, and Stroll starting 19th and DNFing. How do you look at Aston Martin this week? A very good race from Vettel, who really is taking this team by the scruff of the neck.
Yeah, they'll be happy on one side of the garage and disappointed on the other. Vettel had a very good qualifying. Stroll didn't. It's as simple as that. But Aston Martin will still be very pleased to get 8 points, and they'll be level on a Haas in the constructors. And they're not having as many reliability problems as Haas, so we'll have to wait and see if they'll be able to develop their car more compared to Haas throughout the season. And Vettel had a very good race. There was only one small mistake from Vettel when he had to go down the escape road, but that very quick 180 was very impressive, I have to say. I was kind of surprised how quickly he rejoined the track. I was kind of sitting back in my seat thinking, oh no, he's going to wipe out Yuki Tsunoda. But to be fair, he judged that to perfection. And it was a very good weekend for Vettel.
Yeah, as you said, that 360 or that 180 was so cool. It was just, you're sitting there, as you said, and see him go down a escape road, and you're like, oh, he's had a nightmare, he's locked up. And if there was no room for error here, because the back end of his car was like less than a meter away from the wall. So there's no room for error, but he's down the escape road, he's span around, gave Tsunoda some room and rejoined the track, only losing 1 place on top of course, his Ocon. So it was that was a cool moment in the race as well. And some great points. Could have potentially battled for 5th if he hadn't had that moment, but 8 points for Aston Martin. They're not only in a battle with Haas, but they're starting to maybe catch Alfa Tauri, Alfa Romeo, if they can keep getting consistent points. So from where they were at the start of the season, they'll be very happy collecting 8 points at Baku. But then Stroll, he had a rubbish weekend. His red flags in qualifying were stupid, and his DNF wasn't his fault, to be fair, but he wasn't running in the points, so it didn't really matter that much. Now on to Williams, who are, the worst team on the grid this year so far. They had Alex Albon, who started 17th, finished 12th, and Latifi started 18th, finished 15th, getting 15 seconds worth of penalties. 0 points, bottom of the table, with every team starting to pull away from them. How do you look at Williams this weekend? They're going to need a mammoth effort to just not finish last in the Constructors this year.
Yeah, they have to climb a steep mountain to not finish last in the Constructors. I think Latifi ended up finishing like, I don't know, it was between like 45 seconds or something behind Mick Schumacher. And yeah, as I said, 5 DNFs, and yeah, Latifi's still finishing last. On the face of it, Albon, P17 to P12. It kind of just shows really the difference between Latifi and Albon. But yeah, they need to. It's very clear they need to develop their car. Their pace is really strange as well. Like, you know, some weeks Albon's amazing, and then, you know, Spain, I think he got beaten by Latifi. So yeah, the pace of the Williams just isn't there. And as you said, all the other teams are, you know, well, apart from the few Ferrari ones, gained points this weekend. So yeah, they'll be very concerned at Williams.
Yeah, they'll certainly be concerned. It's not quite the Haas last season where they picked up 0 points all season, but it is still concerning with Albon just seeming to be very track dependent where he turns up. I mean, it might be the car, it might be Albon, but in Monaco and Spain, as you said, he had a torrid time, especially in Monaco, where he was just like picked up penalties galore and then DNF'd. And I mean, 12th on the face of it seems all right, but if you look at the cars behind him, it was Tsunoda who was in the pits for ages getting his wing gaffer taped. It was Schumacher, who is in a really slow Haas, and it was Latifi, his teammate, who got 50 seconds worth of penalties. So he hasn't really pulled up many trees this weekend, but yeah, their car needs to get developed big time. Otherwise, they're really going to struggle. But onto a lighter note, let's move on to driver of the day. Who stood out to you this weekend on the Sunday especially, and put in a good enough performance that stood out to you? Who have you gone for driver of the day?
There wasn't like a obvious standout one. I know Hamilton got voted driver of the day and had a very good weekend, but I decided to go with Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin. Kind of backing up what I've already said, you know, how a driver can be very good at a track and get the maximum out of the car, and that's basically what he did this weekend. You know, qualifying P9, finishing P6, getting 8 points, moving Aston Martin on level with Haas. He had a very good weekend apart from that one small mistake, and yeah, it's nice to see Vettel high up finishing P6, you know, after all the criticism he's been getting this season, you know, about his future and his attitude and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it kind of just proves how good of a driver he is. And yeah, so I've given Vettel driver of the day.
Yeah, certainly a great race from Vettel, and he was definitely a contender, but I have gone for Lewis Hamilton, the person that the fans voted for driver of the day. And a few weeks ago, I gave Lando Norris my driver of the day because he put in a great performance despite feeling very ill. And so I couldn't then follow it up with Lewis Hamilton putting in a great performance despite his back almost snapping in half. He was in a really bad way due to the porpoising in the car and had just this back pain plaguing his weekend, but he still managed to bring home a solid P4 finish from 7th place. And even though he lost a few places under the virtual safety car where they stopped to do a double stack where Vettel ended up in front, he did end up getting back past those cars. And yeah, P4, very solid finish for him, especially with the back problems plaguing him. They need to get that car sorted. It's unlike at the Haas where Magnussen's getting back problems from carrying the team. Hamilton's getting back problems because his car is just undrivable because of porpoising. So hopefully that gets finished, where hopefully the porpoising gets fixed, whether that's a team thing or that's a new regulation from the FIA. But a great finish for Hamilton. Not great for his health, but great finish for the team and great finish for his driver's standing. And that wraps up our podcast looking back at the Baku, the Grand Prix, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, looking at the incidents team by team and giving our driver of the day. Thank you for listening. Remember to like, subscribe, comment down below what your thoughts were on the race. Who's your driver of the day? Let us know. Remember, our socials are linked down below if you want to stay up to date on everything we have coming up next week, or in less than a week now, is the Canadian Grand Prix, the home race to the two best drivers on the grid. So we will be bringing you a preview and a fancy show in a few days' time. So keep an eye out for that. As I said, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.